During the coaching process, Corbin had some additional dialogues with Alexander, who works in Silicon Valley in the US and was visiting. And we thought you might be interested to see interviews from the point of view of someone who does a lot of them to recruit staff into very highly paid positions. It does tend to be one-on-one interviewing rather than you being interviewed by a group of people. And the typical process in the States is you will meet maybe up to half a dozen individuals who work for that organization. And between them, they decide if they're going to make you a job offer.
Success.
That tends to be a complete ludicrous oath on camera.
That's what we want.
Keep that.
Don't be afraid to be a ludicrous oath or to talk for days. That's the plan.
Alexander said that right at the start to put Corbin at ease and establish that the dialogue is one between peers or adult to adult, and not to think of him as a teacher and a parent-child relationship. The meta-language is also to give Corbin permission to question and challenge, because Alexander particularly likes interaction.
Day 5, I suppose, of the University of Life. That's what Graham has named this course. This is Alex. This is Graham's oldest son. And we're about to talk about some of Alex's expertise.
Things and stuff,
Indeed.
yes.
As you've probably heard Graham mention 100,000 times, Alex did a talk on tokenomics, which is your own idea.
That's right. Yes. That's sort of a methodology for understanding human motivation that I came up with a few years back. By the way, in terms of little aside, you can probably hopefully edit this out, but every time you lean on the table, it's going to wobble the camera. So the stuff that we currently have going on, there's a few times where you've got table
wobble
disturbance. Okay. So, all right.
No more table disturbance.
Okay. Do you want to do a restart with our wobbles, or do you want to keep going? Because we can do both.
Let's keep going.
Okay,
and
good.
If needs be, I can redo one.
Yes, because I find going backwards and forwards over video content to be excruciating.
Yes, I didn't realise that the...
Yeah.
Yes, it does indeed do a table.
All right. Okay. Yes. So tokenomics, broadly speaking, one reason why I thought it would be relevant for this video series and tallies in with the stuff that I know that Dad's been talking about is tokenomics is a name I came up with for, if you like, a way of understanding human motivation that plays into stuff that you want to then read and understand in a business context or an interview context or what have you. The idea of tokenomics is that the way that there's two kinds of motivation that people exhibit, what you might think of as extrinsic motivation and then intrinsic motivation. So in other words, I say to you, will you go buy me a beer and, by the way, here's 20 quid and you can keep the change or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I would like you to clean my garden and I'm going to waste however many dollars in front of you. That sort of thing, that's extrinsic motivators.
Alex's use of language is almost the opposite of mine. I keep words simple to be clear to an international audience. Alex lives and works in the high-tech world of Silicon Valley in California, where meaning is conveyed with long words, often technical-sounding jargon and computer speak. The other pressure is to say things quickly, so they talk fast and just use the first letter of a long word and group words into threes. The end result is a lot of three-letter acronyms, or as they would say, TLAs.
So do this or I'll shoot you, or do this and I'll give you cash. These are the sort of things which are
immediate reward.
They are the sort of things that we normally think about in terms of, the classic, punishment reward type of system. But there's a large amount of really interesting research that's gone on about how people really actually operate and think in the workplace. And in fact, everything that they do has to do with intrinsic motivators. So the intrinsic motivators would be to do with Am I a generous person? Am I somebody who people consider to be friendly or good looking or intelligent or whatever it is? And so the idea of tokenomics is that you can measure these intrinsic motivators that drive people's lives. In that basically people are trying to collect one or another kinds of token, if you like. There are certain that people in their head store some number of pieces that go together to form what you might call their self-myth, their self-story about who they are. And a lot of the behavior that they exhibit in the course of their day-to-day life is one part of their brain which holds on to these little pieces of self-story, are basically holding them up as mental goal states. And then the rest of the brain is basically looking to match those goal states. So it's looking to sort of like get people to, like if I consider myself a generous person, the other part of my brain that's looking to match against that goal is looking for opportunities to demonstrate how generous I am, or what have you. And then people basically bolt that pattern of behavior into the way they operate.
So tokenomics is a particular aspect of a person's self-talk and the script they live by. It is a driver for an internal thought process, or what's now called intrinsic motivation. There's lots of stuff on the web, including Very Well Health, but some better sites as well for extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. It influences people's behavior to make them collect different kinds of tokens that their subconscious has decided are valuable to that person. Alexander here calls them personal goal states.
So in the context of interviews and stuff like that you've looked at, is you walk into something like an interview situation, you sit down next to somebody who's interviewing you, they will be giving away cues on their face and in their body the whole time about what they really motivate on.
Yeah.
So every time you talk with somebody, there are little facial cues and indicators of where they sit, stuff like this, that have to do with like what they're actually getting off on.
Yeah.
And if you're careful and if you're practiced, you can watch and you can see.
And you can learn.
And also the kinds of questions that they ask will give you clues as to how they're self-motivating.
Although this dialogue between Alex and Corbin looks different, you can see where it fits Corbin's and hopefully your own development process as a follow-on to earlier interview ninja sessions based on the Corbin dialogues originally recorded. To understand what Alex means by kind of questions the interviewer asks, that refers to 5W2H, who, what, why, when, where, how, and how much, and other aspects of laser questioning and active listening, which are covered in some detail in the Cypress tapes and other steps in the Interview Ninja course.
Because how you motivate, how you self-validate as an interviewer is different from how you self-validate as an interviewee. As an interviewee, quite often, you're on the back foot. You're going in, you might feel a little bit anxious about it, like, oh my God, how am I going to pass this interview?
Yeah.
The truth, if you like, is that any business situation is a peer-wise agreement that happens between you, the potential employee, and the totality of that organization of which the interviewer is a representative. There is no inherent true status differential there, except that the way our society runs builds one in, which means that the interviewer usually is looking to, they see an opportunity often to collect validation tokens for themselves from whoever is sitting there opposite.
They've been given this level of status, which doesn't actually exist.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that they then tend to ask questions which feed their own notion of how clever or special they are, and they tend to steer the conversations often towards the kinds of things that they would like to think are important with regards to the job.
So the best way to think about the conversation is as a partnership between you and the interviewer, who has been tasked by the organization he or she works for to find somebody to do a particular job. There may be a lot of pressure to find somebody quickly. if you're going to help them find the right person, which is you if you want the job, then it's important that you work together to find a match between what you can do and the organization's needs as the interviewer thinks them to be. You are working together to find the potential win-win.
So if you're a cunning interviewee, you basically watch and listen. And not only can you see what is the fuel that this person is running on, because if the person is extracting, basically taking validation at the cost of you, making themselves feel and look big at your expense, you probably don't want to work there.
But if you were working with, say you were applying for a company, and someone was interviewing you, and they were asking you questions for this job, and I can totally see how someone in that system would get the level of satisfaction out of you making them feel special, because that's where they are, and they're like, oh, that confirms it, I am amazing, because check this guy out, he can't do it. But they would struggle to get someone in for the job if the things that they look for are you not being able to do what they can do. Do you see what I'm saying?
That is true. I mean, essentially what people are often looking for, particularly, I've worked in tech for a long time. What people look for in tech is there is this coded notion of a culture fit. And what culture fit means is nobody really knows what culture fit is. And you get various different companies, Facebook, Google, whoever, who basically interview in different ways, interviewing for culture fit without ever really being a psychological clear understanding of what that entails. But broadly speaking, it's like an attempt to do a grown-up version of, do you like this person? Do you think you can work with them? What that often means is it's a combination of things to do with whether or not this person is good at solving questions up at the board, and like if I create some implementation question, can the person solve that? But it's also how much do they feel a spontaneous sensation of rapport.
Building rapport is a soft skill that has been taught for hundreds or even thousands of years. Here's a slide that shows it broken down into a 5-step process, from acknowledgement through understanding, acceptance, respect, and eventually achieving a degree of trust. You can practice it anytime, anywhere, when you meet people, and it's a very enjoyable skill to have developed.
Now, you can, as an interviewer, as an informed interviewer, you can build that sensation of rapport by essentially finding ways to put the interviewer at ease. Now, it's a little bit difficult as compared to other types of situation, because often when you're looking to get people at ease, what you're doing is you get them to talk about themselves. So there's a very brilliant book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which talks about, the notion of cognitive ease and basically the different kinds of mental process that kick in during different kinds of sort of dialogue and what have you. But broadly speaking, what you want people to be doing, if you want them to feel a sensation of rapport with you, is to put them into a place in their heads where they're running on intuition. If their conscious mind is kicking in too much, or they're experiencing sets of threats or discomfort from the input they're producing, then they are far less likely that they'll be second guessing their opinion of you the entire time. So the more that you can create a sensation of cognitive ease, the more likely you are to succeed as an interviewee.
Another way of describing cognitive ease goal states is quite simply comfort zones, and that's what we've been using so far. So keep taking those notes, because this is all about you and the way you see the world and the way you plan to get more control when you go into interviews. This is a good break point, because Alexander's probably going to go into some kind of deep dive about motivation or whatever. So relax, have a cup of coffee or something, and we'll pick this all up later.